It is a time of a pandemic, a time that people like us haven't seen before. And there are some who even dare say we may never see again. Businesses are indeed suffering. Investors are wondering what is happening to their investment. But there are indeed a good side to it. Opportunities are emerging even from the ashes of the pandemic. The growth of digital engagement, which now allows a tailor in Nigeria to receive an order for a fabric by a Nigerian in London, for him to sew a native attire, hoping for a time when he will come to Lagos for a wedding. In the past, you didn't have any of that at all. So let's talk about the challenges, but also let us not fail to talk about the opportunities and the good bright sides that are emerging. For the conversation today, we have as moderator Ngozi Chidozie, who is a partner, partner in charge of management consulting at KPMG. Juliet, a face that we all now must see on a regular basis, assuming we were not seeing before. Juliet is country director for Google in Nigeria. You can say this is their time. We also have another person, Dr. Ayatunde Koka of RAC Center, Managing Director, CEO of RAC Center, who ensures that everything we do digitally today can find a safe place, to be stored. Then, of course, Bumi Akin-Yemiju is CEO of Venture Garden Group. I haven't had the opportunity to visit you, but I've heard some very great things about your office, and I hope you will permit me to come at some point in the future. Then, of course, finally, as a panelist, we have Omowale David Ashiru, who is Vice President Global Operation at Andela. Now, let me welcome you all formally and to say that along with our audience, we are indeed expecting some interesting tips, some insights around what you see and how we can better benefit even in the time of lockdown. At this point, I'd like to formally hand over the conversation to Ngozi, who will be our moderator. Once again, thank you very much, and I hope that you are as excited as I am. Ngozi.
Thank you very much, Frank. So I want to say a very warm welcome to all, and welcoming everyone to our webinar. It's titled The Growth Industries in the New Normal, Global Opportunities for Africa. And, for as long as we've had the pandemic, we've really began to talk about the new normal. The objective of this webinar is really to provide a platform for stakeholders to engage, perhaps businesses that are outside of Africa that are interested in investing in Africa, even at this time, to have a view of what's happening here. I guess the second objective is also to identify sectors that will drive growth in the new normal. The last, but certainly not the least of the objectives, is to determine or highlight the growth imperatives for businesses, taking into consideration the role of technology in this. I have a very short agenda, which is what I'll just talk us through. What we're doing now is the introduction. I will then have a 12 to 15 minutes presentation, which would serve as the basis for the discussions that we'll have with the panelists thereafter. We will then have a little time for Q&A so that we can also engage participants on this. A few housekeeping rules. If you have any question or any contribution you wish to share, please use your Zoom chat, note it down, and time permitting, we would address the questions. I guess the second housekeeping rule is that we intend to ensure that all participants are truly involved in this and engaged. And so we'll be running some polls. And as we run those polls, please also respond to the questions that we would ask. So very quickly, I would go through the presentation on the growth industries in the new normal and global opportunities for Africa. Frank has already spoken very highly of the rich panelists that we have, so I would skip that. But if you look at the first slide that I have that's showing on the screen right now, we find that the COVID-19 disease is having a huge impact on the global economy, and the way we've now started singing the mantra of the new normal comes very directly from the impact of COVID. And if you look at it as it relates to countries and businesses and individuals, there are actually three main buckets that you would see COVID-19 impacting the economy. So first is the human impact. And the human impact is also linked to the social impact. Overall, the latest statistics we have upwards of 5.5 million confirmed cases, about 350 deaths that we've seen globally. And we don't hear a lot about the recoveries, but we have good numbers for recoveries, 2.2 million. Now, if you come down to Africa, it's even a better picture that you see. In Africa, we have over 115,000 confirmed cases, of which we've had 3,000 deaths. Majority of the people that have been infected are recovering. In Nigeria, it's even a better picture, because as of 2 days ago, or yesterday actually, we had 8,000 confirmed cases, 233 deaths, and about 2,000 recoveries. So that's the human impact. But then there is the economic impact, which is where you'd find a lot of African countries struggle. So we've used the proxy of the GDP growth rate as to show what the economic impact is. And if you look at IMF forecasts, the figures that we had as of January 2020 and where we are today in April or May of 2020, you would see that many countries have suffered or are suffering a contraction. So for instance, you look at Ghana with an estimated GDP growth of close to 6% in January, now barely making 1.5 as at the latest information that we have in April. But what's more powerful is that if you look at a country like Nigeria, we estimated that we're going to have a 2.5% growth rate in January. As at April, we're at negative 3.4. And I listened to the Minister of Finance a couple weeks back, and she said the worst case scenario for us is a contraction of close to 9%. This is a contraction of 9% in a country where our population growth rate is close to 3%. So you're growing your numbers, but in terms of production, you're contracting by 9%. I mean, maybe that's what speaks to the bigness or the range of the impact of COVID-19. Now, the business impact flows directly from the economic impact, and we've used the statistic of market capitalization and attraction of capital as a proxy for this, and it's all blood on the dance floor, because if you look at Ghana, the Ghana Stock Exchange, the Kenyan Stock Exchange, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and the Joburg Stock Exchange, the difference between December and June is as clear as day. There's a major contraction in terms of the capital markets. So clearly this is a big issue for us. But let's talk more about the impact on sectors. So the slide I have here tries to mirror what is happening all over the world. So on your left, you'd see a chart that shows the sectors that have diminished and contracted as a result of COVID, and the sectors that are actually doing quite well. So top of the list of the sectors that have suffered, you have the airlines, you have the oil and gas, you have the automobile industry, you have banks and insurance companies. All these companies have suffered major losses. And it makes sense that they have suffered this quantum of loss just because of the sit at home and the lack of activity in the economies, which should typically trickle down as productivity. But on the other side, if you look at the sectors that are doing well, you have software companies that are doing well. You have businesses in healthcare, perhaps, that are doing well. You have media streaming agencies, a lot of businesses that are really strong on digitization and technology. So those are some of the businesses that have sort of, that are doing quite well as we see today in this new normal. We've also tried to mirror this type of comparison to what we're seeing in Nigeria, and that's the chart you have on your right. And it's really the proxy for how well we are doing as a country. You will see that many of the Nigeria Stock Exchange indexes, and so we have the oil and gas index, we have the banking index, we have the pension index, we have the insurance index, they are really all below the line. It's a contraction. Now, the biggest contraction happened sometime early in April to mid-April, and we've actually started seeing some sort of recovery. This recovery is tenuous at best because we don't know what will happen in the next couple of weeks or months going into the future. So this is a perspective where we are sort of comparing what's happened in the global arena to what we see here. But another level of comparison that would show is just what I'll show on the next slide. It shows the businesses that have done well and the businesses that, it shows the businesses that are winners and the businesses that are losers. And as expected, the winners are businesses in e-commerce, so Amazon, perhaps Google. We have businesses in logistics and delivery. We have businesses in video conferencing, and I believe everyone signed on this webinar will bear us witness. We're on Zoom now. Many businesses use Teams routinely. There's Cisco WebEx. Those guys are smiling to the bank. Then we have businesses in health tech, entertainment, streaming and gaming, the likes of HBO and Netflix. The businesses that haven't done so well, that's what you have on your right. So you have airlines, transportation, tourism, oil and gas, sports and entertainment. And sports and entertainment, you understand, because a lot of the sports events have been put on hold on account of this. But this is a simple way of looking at it. What we've then done is to show more context to what we think would happen on the path of recovery. So this is a fairly different way of showing the conversation that we just had prior to this. And it's the 4 buckets of recovery. So on my left, you have the businesses that we've called businesses that are in the hard reset. These are businesses that would typically struggle to recover from COVID. And those are the businesses that I listed as businesses that are losers. So for instance, the airlines industry. I think it was Boeing that declared close to 600 million loss second quarter. And I think a number of the airlines, the global airlines are also suffering in the same way. Then we have the brick and mortar retail, the brick and mortar retail stores. Education, but it's different. This is education, in-person education, oil and gas business, hotels, restaurants, entertainment venues. So I'm trying to be clear exactly the types of sectors and businesses that we think would have to do a hard reset and they will struggle to recover from COVID. Now, on the other side of this chart, you have the businesses that are surging. These are businesses that are benefiting as we speak today. E-commerce, telecoms, logistics, delivery companies, edu-tech, because now we know that actually our kids can go to school from home. Health tech, digital infrastructure, and streaming media. So whilst you have some businesses that are in the hard research, you also have some businesses that are in the search. And these are businesses that we are seeing do well today. As we have the conversation, so it will be good to just hear also from the panelists what their perspectives are around this dimension. Beyond these two classes, we also think that businesses would also adopt different methodologies to reemerge. So there's one that we've called transform to reemerge. Can we go back one slide, please? There's a grouping of businesses that we've termed transform to reemerge, and there's a grouping of businesses that we've called modified business as usual. So let me take the modified business as usual. And these businesses are seen as daily essentials. They will suffer, but will recover very quickly because demand is present and real. So businesses like banking, consumer goods, agriculture, and transportation, those demands are real. And if I take consumer goods, for instance, some consumer goods companies have suffered a decline in this period. But if you look at Reckitt Benckiser, a global company, they haven't actually suffered at all, and they've grown by maybe 3% or 2.3% in this period. But the businesses that we feel would really have to do a lot just in terms of totally transforming their operating models are the businesses that we have on the bottom part of the left side of my slide, which is transform to reemerge. They are the businesses in travel and leisure, real estate and construction, healthcare, professional services, kind of the type of services that we in KPMG offer. We really need to transform to reemerge. So this is a categorization of the various recovery paths. On the next slide, what I'll talk us through is the different phases of this crisis maturity. Now, I'll advise that we sort of listen to this because I have a poll right after this. And we see that the different phases of crisis maturity would go from reaction all the way to new reality. And let me just spend a few minutes to talk about this. So the reaction is what happened when we were faced with this COVID pandemic. So, I mean, the characteristics of this phase is that professional and personal lives rapidly and simultaneously was disrupted. We had lockdown orders and everything was all about essential consumption. People, businesses, individuals had immediate liquidity crisis, and the primary focus was on limiting damage to lives and livelihoods. I mean, that was the period of chaos. We didn't know what COVID-19 was, and we were struggling to understand it. And that's what we call the reaction phase. Then the next phase is the resilience phase. You're managing through uncertainty. At this stage, panic behavior is subsiding and controls are being loosened. People are now beginning to have the view that, you know, this COVID, it may be curable. It's not a life sentence. Consumer demand still constrained by lost wages because people did indeed lose their jobs, investment losses and recessionary fears. Supply chains are slow to recover. So we haven't gotten to the point where supply chains have come back full speed. And so that's resilience. In the recovery phase, in crisis maturity, this is where people are beginning to have a lot more hope. Capital projects begin to scale and fuel rehiring. Consumer sentiment and consumption improves because people are now beginning to get jobs. Investment trends are trending up and anxiety is passing. The last phase is really the new normal. And what we find is that you'd have an interaction between the recovery and the new normal. The new normal or the new reality phase is that we all as businesses, as individuals, as countries, we all have to adapt to a new world. I mean, the new normal sets in as the learned behaviors that we picked up during the reaction resilience phase becomes standard. So I suspect that even when we find the cure for COVID-19, You would not have everybody having to report at their offices on a daily basis. You would perhaps not require the office space. If you had a big headquarters, you would not all require the space that you required pre-COVID. And then I think just the nature of interactions, which is communication, travel, education, is irrevocably changed. I mean, this is our perspective as KPMG on the crisis maturity phases. So what I'll do next is run a quick poll. I want to find out from the audience what their views are in terms of what phase of the crisis maturity you would say your business is in now. So I'll give us maybe 20 seconds. It's a really quick poll. What crisis maturity phase do you think your business is? And the information is coming in. I cannot say that I'm really surprised. I'll be able to share with us soon. So we have a few more seconds to reach a decision from the audience. So what phase of crisis maturity would you say your business is in? So I'll give us a few more seconds and we'll be reporting very soon. Of the participants, we have about 71% of our participants have voted. It's a decent number. All right, so I shall end it here. And I am not surprised by what I've seen. So a majority, so 74% of us, a majority of us, about 45% of us feel that our businesses are in the resilience phase. About 44% of us feel that we're in the resilience phase. It's interesting that 24% of us feel that we are in the new reality. 12% of us feel that we're in the reaction phase, which is the first phase. And I think 21% of us feel that we are in the recovery phase. It's not surprising to me that a majority of us feel that we are in the resilience phase. So I'll go on with the presentation. And so if you look at this, our views also is that we are certainly in the resilience phase. So we've sort of mapped the COVID timeline just on the basis of looking at how the world is responding and the impact of this pandemic on individuals and businesses and the country and countries as a whole. What we see is that if you look at us here in Nigeria, we had our first index case sometime late in February. And we feel that from that period up until sometime early May, we were still in the reaction phase. We feel that we are in the beginnings of the resilience phase. And so we feel that the resilience phase would last from around middle of May up until very late in the year. And we would begin to see a fairly decent recovery from January, which would segue into the new reality, which we envisage we'll see end of next year. So if you look at this now, the recoveries may be different for different sectors, but if you take a straight line graph and try to plot the response to this crisis, we think that where we are now is there is resilience phase, and it's interesting that the participants at the session also feel the same way. Now on the next slide, what we want to talk about are really the eight themes 8 themes that would characterize the journey to the new reality. And this would be my last slide so that we can get on the discussions with our panelists. So we have 8 themes that we think will characterize the journey of the new reality. I think one that we've all experienced or we are experiencing is just the new ways of life. Corporate travel and real estate, we have to reimagine how that works. And then we really have to make bigger investments in collaboration infrastructure. Just in terms of workforce, we have to really think about how we reskill our people, and digital talent becomes really key for us going forward. In terms of digital commerce, like I said, there is a need for significant investments in enabling technologies, especially payments, artificial intelligence, and platforms. For supply chains, I have a real interest in the supply chains. There's going to have to be a greater focus on agility. We think that there's going to be a shift from a predominant single source supplier like we've had in the past, where Asia was the big supplier to the world. So we have China and India. We think that there needs to be a shift from that. And we will talk about this more with our panelists. Just in terms of continuity and resilience, we think investments in technology is key, and it's a no-brainer for new business operating models. On environment and climate change, see, prior to the pandemic, there was this drive towards being more environmentally compliant. We think that with the pressure of COVID, there will be a pressure of growth, which would deprioritize environmental and social and governance values and mandates in the short term. People and businesses will first be trying to survive before they start thinking about the environment. Now, this situation presents an opportunity for proactive business models that can take advantage of this and show the value of ESG values to provide a differentiation. The last two, I'll just spend a little bit of time talking about, and it's the debt burden. This is a clear and present danger today. There will be stronger competition for funding. And beyond having stronger competition for funding for businesses, there's going to be an ongoing challenge of balancing servicing of mounting debts. And these debts would occur in individual lives, would occur in businesses, and would occur for government. There will be a need to balance servicing of debts versus funding for much required business transformation, because like we've said, this is a new normal. You really have to transform your business. So there's going to be that challenge of balancing. How do you service the debts that I already have versus how do I invest in the models and the transformation that would make me relevant and sustainable into the future. Just in terms of globalization, I think there will be a big rethink. There's going to be a greater need to balance between what you do in the local markets and what you do in the international markets, and indeed whether you actually need to expose yourself as a business to international markets. So I think that this is the last slide that we have. What I'll do very quickly is really to segue into the question and answer and discussion portion of this. The panelists were introduced to begin with, but for people that perhaps didn't join at the beginning, let me do a quick recap of the panelists that we have on here with us. So we have Mr. Ayotunde Koka. Mr. Ayotunde Koka is the MD of RAC Center. RAC Center is the foremost data center in Africa. He worked with Business Day to set up this webinar. So thank you Tunde. And then obviously we have Juliet Chiazo, who is the country manager of Google. I feel that Google will be smiling to the bank in this situation. So welcome, Juliet. We have Bumi Akinyemiju, who is the CEO of the Venture Group. The way I like to describe Bumi is that he's a serial entrepreneur. He's been involved in a number of successful entrepreneurial initiatives, and he keeps looking for good deals. And then the last Certainly not the least is Omowale David Ashiru, who is the VP Global Operations of Andela. Andela is a US company with a very strong presence in Africa. Andela has offices in Nigeria, Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya, and they have major plans to expand. Now, Andela is a software development company that develops software engineers. So, I mean, that's a full mouth in sort of describing my panelists today. So I guess my first question, and what I'll do is this question, I'll ask all the panelists, what's your view on the businesses that are going to thrive in the new normal? So that's the first part of this question. What's your view on the businesses that are going to thrive in the new normal? And perhaps I should start with Tunde, if you don't mind. So Tunde, you get the opportunity to go first.
Okay, thank you very much. And I thank all the panelists for being here with us, and Frank, especially, and all of the attendees. There's a pattern. It's with the new businesses that will thrive, where you've got around digital infrastructure. You've got those that can operate digitally and remotely, and those that need to serve the basic needs, for instance, fundamental needs. And that's where primarily we're seeing the thriving. Now, there's another set of businesses that will have to pivot into the new environment, and some have done that very, very quickly. What we also, I believe, is going to happen is this shift of supply chains to risk, to reduce the risk of businesses that have distributed supply chains around the world. And we'll see some of that happening. So the opportunity therefore will be for the businesses that can take on these new demands for new supply chains in new locations like West Africa, like Nigeria, for instance. From a digital infrastructure point of view, you see, some infrastructure takes a long time to build. It takes years to build a data center. So, for instance, in the location like what we provide, for instance, it's a good place to start from. So a lot of that digital infrastructure, world-class quality exists, the cable systems to feed data and information into the location around here. So we have some good starting points for businesses to leverage and reconfigure to make sure they get the benefits of the new normal, for want of a better term.
Thank you very much, Tunde. Thank you very much. Julia, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure, thank you very much. I'd say one of the realities of this pandemic is the rapid migration to digital. And the industries that are thriving and that will continue to thrive are those that lend themselves quite naturally to the current changes in customer behavior and are able to meet the changing needs of customers, because increasingly customers are going online. So e-commerce, for example, is on the rise and will continue to be. Fintech as adoption as well is on the rise as people rely on mobile apps, mobile banking to conduct financial transactions. Online entertainment, in fact, in some countries, online gaming has really exploded. We certainly have seen an increase in watch time on platforms like YouTube and number of users. Technology and telecommunications. These are obviously platform and service providers that are required to meet the increased demand for digital services. From a telecoms perspective, for example, we've seen an upsurge in data consumption. Some of the telecom operators will tell you that some access points are sold out because people, there are so many more webinars, live streaming, and all that. And so people are really increasing their consumption of data and access points. And also technology service providers, as organizations try to adapt to the new normal, increasingly, they're going to require support around digital transformation, around business integration of technology, and so on. And so those service areas are likely to continue to increase, as well as adoption of cloud computing solutions. Now, this migration to digital also creates an increased demand for things like data security. And there'll be a need for robust security systems. It's very likely we'll see blockchain technologies on the rise and more robust systems. And I think in general, investors should really look out for companies that are able to excel in meeting the needs of the moment, especially those that are innovative in solving the emerging needs that are based on the existing trends.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Thank you very much for that. Bumi, do you have any views on this?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ngozi. And my view on this is that it's kind of going back to the basics and saying, what does it take? What will it take for companies to thrive at a time like this? And I think it kind of comes down to the fact that the quality of entrepreneurs, right? The resilience of entrepreneurs, the agility and the ability to adapt is what's going to be key. I know we've talked a lot about, digital companies and, cloud and those types of things, right? But I also want to point out the fact that these types of opportunities to actually recover and then thrive can apply to any company, even traditional companies, right? It's then about how do you apply digital? You're an agricultural company. How do you apply digital to be able to thrive, right? You're a real estate company. What does it mean in a digital world? So I think it's more of a case where if you look at all the past wars, like World War I, World War II, like big giant companies emerge from those. And what are the characteristics of these companies? It's like resilient entrepreneurs who are able to, look at their traditional business, adapt to, what's happening right now. And I think that adaptation today is pretty much saying, what does it mean to take my products to the market right now? So I like like an example of somebody who is just selling clothes. Like, can I now set up my e-commerce store on Instagram? Can I collect money in an easier way? Can I provide customer service over WhatsApp? Can I create a whole experience and then I'm thriving? Meanwhile, somebody else could say, well, social distancing, I can't open my shop anymore, so I'm about to die. I think the difference is entrepreneurs who can say, how do I adapt and how do I actually go big, with the current circumstances?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, sorry, I'm having this. I think perhaps we'll take the last comment from Omowale.
All right, thank you, Ngozi. I think the other panelists have said most of it. In terms of thriving, we're talking about digitalization or digital businesses. In 2015, John Chambers said in 10 years, if you're not a digitized business, you will die. What I think COVID pandemic has done has reduced the 10-year span. And so every business and every industry should be looking at how to incorporate technology and digitalization, just like Bumi said. I think the other thing to look at is in terms of remote work. People have said this, that what the pandemic did was basically give a worldwide experiment as to remote working. And so in terms of thriving, companies with remote work technologies, because remote work isn't just about working from home. There are a lot of nuances and there are a lot of tools and a lot of things that actually make it efficient, and make it profitable. And so, companies that look into that and invest in that will definitely thrive, not just in the immediate future, but long term, so that's the other aspect I wanted to add about remote working technologies.
So thank you very much, Omawale. Thank you very much. So I guess the next question I have, and it's very similar to what we talked about earlier. I suspect that we are bound to see a different approach to sourcing and supply chains as companies emerge from this pandemic. We expect that we'll have shorter supply chains, would expect businesses to want more control to forestall future occurrences of this nature. So I have a question that I actually want to direct to Tunde first, and then maybe Bumi can chime in. And the question is, how should African businesses and certainly Nigerian businesses be positioning to take advantage of this? So Tunde, if you want to go first.
Yes, thank you. Is the what I'll call other aspects of the aspects. I guess some sacred cows have to be slain, and that is around ease of doing business, stuff like that. We've been making good progress as an economy in Nigeria, and that has to be fast-tracked. We need to have things like moving broadband penetration up as a national priority. And if you see some of the governors here have been really crushing the cost of right-of-way, very good move. We've got to really get to the average level of sort of 60, 70% very quickly, more like an 18-month, 2-year time scale rather than a 5-year time scale. Mm-hmm. And also we have to be digitally connected. And as I said earlier on, from a digital infrastructure point of view, we're not starting from a bad place. We have, as RAC Center, global recognition, the highest global standards, connect all the undersea. We have good undersea cable feed into the continent that enables the country, West Africa, to be connected to the world. And you have companies like Google actually even increasing and providing much more. We'll be providing much more connectivity. So we have a great geophysical location as Africa. So from an industrial point of view, get ease of doing business, right? And proximity of digital infrastructure, I think there's an opportunity for global companies to know that they can distribute their supply chains into the Africa location. The geophysical location, the benefit is such like, we dissect the world, north to south and east to west. What you'll find also is more globalization. It's not just about companies being here. You have to interrelate and interwork efficiently. So as you see digital come here to reduce the latency, for instance, you'll also find that you need to be able to work efficiently with companies elsewhere. So we'll see companies that provide interconnect services, some digital content providers and so on, and maybe even the Netflixes of these worlds and so on, feel they have to get closer to the customer. So the performance of their digital services are better. Companies will also know that they need to optimize the way they work and locate and therefore interact with other aspects of the supply chains. And I really do believe you'll see that happen quite quickly. And, the kind of infrastructure that I say is a good starting point would enable us to respond to that very, very quickly indeed. The other thing, and you talked about quality in the last slide you showed. I think consumers and the customer, Julia talked about being customer focused and everything. They won't have any appetite for high quality. Having the systems go, and imagine if the Zoom audio just went down right now. So the tolerance for downtime and low quality and so on, it has absolutely diminished. So people will now see higher quality demand in digital infrastructure, which underpins the business. And this is actually, especially in the pandemic, become very, very vivid to companies that have realized that their business is digital. And if that went down, for instance, fintech companies, agri-tech companies, then the customers shift, and they shift very, very quickly indeed, in a very, very unforgiving way.
Okay, thank you, Tunde. We'll have to carry on quite quickly because we're fast approaching the 2 p.m. time. But I want Bumi to chime in on this particular question. But maybe before Bumi starts, let's have a poll where we can also get the audience involved. And the question is really, how optimistic are we that Africa can capture or will capture the emerging opportunities that we see, opportunities around supply chain, a shift in supply chains post-pandemic. So as we do this, we can start with the poll, and I'm asking the participants to please select a question, an answer to the question that we've posed. As we do this, we would listen to Bumi as he presents his own perspectives on the questions we have ongoing.
Thanks, Ngozi. And I think, really, like Tunde said, we have the potential to be a player because there's a new reset. And like I said earlier, a reset happens usually when there's like a big war. And I almost feel like this is like a virtual war that has just happened, and there's a reset. The question then becomes, how does Africa want to partake? What does Nigeria want to do? And for me, there are different participants that have to make a decision. The question is the decision going to be bold, or is it going to be safe, right? So government and regulators, right? That's one. Companies and entrepreneurs, that's two. And then talent and individual professionals, that's three. So the question is, how are they all going to, act? The point is, as everybody's thinking about the supply chain and making sure that, they're not caught the way they're caught right now, they're going to be saying, okay, can I find this, locally? Can I find it in Africa, right? So somebody in Cameroon is going to be asking that question. Somebody in Burundi will be asking those questions. On the back of the Africa, Free Trade Continental Agreement, as an example, what is it that we can use our talent? We know we have the talent, right? We know we have the skills. We also know we have the population, right? Somebody might have some manufacturing plant where they produce palm wine. How can they adapt that manufacturing plant to demand across Africa? That's one. The role of the entrepreneur, the company. Regulator, government, how can they create the financing that will help these entrepreneurs be successful? How do they create the gateway for transportation, right? For example, I feel like the new normal, people will not be flying as much, right? There will be fewer aircrafts. A lot of airlines will die. The question is, can some of those airlines take these passenger aircraft, turn them into cargo aircraft, and start flying, across the continent? Again, I'm using a very, very tangible example. So an airline could just die because they're still stuck in the old ways, or just think, well, the biggest opportunity right now is actually intra-Africa, right? Hub from all these different small airports that are not functional today. Now you're making money from cargo. So for me, I think it's just a matter of what choice do we want to make.
Thank you very much. And that's actually an interesting perspective that you've brought to the table, and it segues into a question that came up as we were preparing for this. It came up from one of the participants, and just sticking to the point that you made, Bumi, do you think there is now a stronger imperative for governments to get the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement to work? Do you think that there's now a stronger imperative for governments to do that? So maybe the question is to you first, and then maybe Tunde can also chime in on this.
Oh, wow. I think that's a no-brainer. I think the time is now. I think the time is now. I think it's urgent. I think that the decisions and steps we make in the next 90 days to 120 days will determine if we're a player or if we're left behind. I think it's a no-brainer.
Okay. Tunde, do you have any views? Tunde?
Necessity is the mother of invention, and perhaps mother of adoption in these circumstances. You know, you also hear that in Africa, we consume a lot of things we don't produce and produce a lot of things we don't need for collaboration. And that necessity is going to be what will drive a lot of the collaboration, which is related to African Free Trade Agreement. You'll also see in all of this, you know, it's infrastructure around sort of Africa to enable trade. But what you're seeing also is a growth of digital infrastructure across Africa. I talked about the undersea cables that go around Africa. If you look at the growth, even in the last 3 to 4 years, of fiber interconnectivity within Africa away from the coast, a significant amount of progress has been made. You have some companies that are now connecting through land from Kenya to West Africa, from South Africa all the way up to Egypt. So there's certain enabling infrastructure that should make that happen. It now has to actually come down to, one, governments to make it happen, two, for businesses to just not have to wait to have even your own virtual free trade environment.
Thanks, Tunde. So this question that I have is something that's been ruminating in my mind for a bit. And the question is for Omowale and Juliet. I think, well, we all know that there is now an accelerated imperative for digital transformation. We all know that now, and we've experienced it for a couple of months now. What would be your take or your advice to companies with traditional business models to pivot to digitally enabled business and operating models? So maybe go with Juliet first and then let Omowale chime in.
Sure. So I think one thing that has been made clear by this pandemic is the fact that digital transformation is not a nice to have, it is a must have.
Yeah.
Most companies were impacted by the crisis, but some suffered more than others. Those that have before now embraced digital in a big way, have looked at automation of their processes, etc., were less impacted. To be able to pivot effectively, I would suggest that leaders examine their current business components, and I'll mention 4 in particular. One is business processes. So, you know, the processes involved in developing your product or service, like product development, testing, marketing, accounting, human resource management, or back office operations. The second would be customer engagement. How does the customer get your product or service? Do they need to come physically into a store? Is there an app or an online shop? The third would be supply chain management, which was talked about just now. How do we get the raw materials we need for production? And how do we get our product to market? And the fourth would be employee engagement, which is really everything that has to do with talent and performance management. Now, in each of these areas, it's important to access, based on the current trends, what needs to change and how do I leverage technology to create more robustness? Sure. Imagine if there's a lockdown for 1 year, how would your business run? The ideas you come up with, that's what you must do. And it can be broken into short-term tasks, medium-term tasks, and long-term. If I take business processes, for example, in a lot of companies, these processes revolve around, you know, people meeting physically. The tendency was always to bring all the talent and resources into the same location. The lockdown experience has taught us that people can be effective working remotely, right? And so it has forced a lot of companies to think about new models. How do we collaborate when we're not in the same room? And, you know, working from, like Omowale said, it's not just about working from home. There are things that actually enable that. So for example, can people log into your internal systems remotely? Does your firewall allow that, right? Do they have the necessary equipment to be able to do that? Have you invested in shared platforms that allow people to collaborate virtually? You know, platforms like, and there are quite a few of them, there's Slack, there's Microsoft Teams, there's Google Apps. These are tools that a lot of people usually perceive as required for high-tech collaborative projects, but actually they need to be integrated into mainstream business. And so it's important to find a way to ensure that your business processes are dispersed and not concentrated. The second I mentioned was customer engagement. Clearly, we can see that the customer behavior has changed, right? Your customers are going online. They want safety, convenience, reliability, not just low price, but also value and ease of performing transactions. And so your ability to engage the customer clearly cannot be limited to physical presence. It's important to ensure that you are present where your customers are going. So where it makes sense and where it's possible to move transactions online, right? When it's not possible to meet physically, we have platforms like Zoom to make Zoom calls. There's Google Meets, there are a number of others. In the education sector, for example, people can't get to schools, so classrooms have moved online. Fitness instructors, people cannot physically come into the studio or the gym. Now we're having online fitness sessions. Now that also has an implication on competition, because that means your competitors are now wider. So in Lagos, your competitor may be in Abuja, because if the fitness instruction is handled online, then it doesn't really matter where that instructor is, where he's based.
Sure.
And we see this in a lot of other businesses. And then supply chain. Over this period, some supply chains broke down completely because there were different aspects that were constrained. Perhaps a reliance on imports from China and other parts of the world that got disrupted with travel plans. I recall I ordered some things from one of the leading e-commerce platforms just before the lockdown, and it's been almost 2 months now and I haven't received the goods. And this is an organization that would usually be quite effective. So it's important to think about how you can diversify your supply chain.
Yeah.
Some of the supply chain issues are really around, inefficient matching.
Juliet, we're actually running out of time, and I actually want to hear Omowale's perspective. So if you can just, if Omowale can just come in for a minute, then I'll take one last question from the audience, because there's a question for everybody. Do we think that the government is serious about making our environment ready to respond to this pandemic? That's a question for everybody. And so I'll take Omowale's comment, take that last question, show us the outcome of the poll, and then we'll have to call it today because it's 2 minutes to talk. So Omowale, please.
All right. I think the good thing is Juliet has already mentioned a number of the things that I wanted to mention, in terms of going forward, just rethinking, how you work. I think the one thing that I also want to mention in terms of companies here is post the pandemic, what is going to be obvious is that some companies will not be able to survive. Now, let me talk specifically about the tech sector. Liquidity, there are all sorts of things that will be going on. And bigger companies have already seen that they don't have all the capabilities. So I do believe that post the pandemic, there's going to be a lot of acquisition. So whether you are the one to be acquired or the one acquiring, some of the things that you need to be looking at are your financials, having a strong balance sheet, so that even if you're not going to continue, you're in a position, to be acquired and provide the capabilities that some of the other companies need. Also, in terms of talent, obviously reskilling and upskilling is going to be key. The panelists here have mentioned a number of the businesses that will be thriving. And I think this is not just for companies, just for individuals as well. You should be keen into those things. We've talked a lot about remote work. One of the greatest challenges that businesses have had before is finding talent. With the pandemic, we've realized now that we can get talent from anywhere once remote working and automation work. So that's something that people should also invest in terms of reskilling and upskilling, so that they are available, to be hired or to get more talent. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Omowale. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more questions. There was a general question, and the question is, do we feel that government is ready to support with an enabling environment to make all the things that we've talked about relevant and able to exist in this market? I'll give each person maybe 7 seconds to just share with us what you think in terms of whether you think government is ready and able and willing to provide a type of environment that supports some of the magnificent ideas that we've shared. So maybe I'll start with Bumi. very quickly, do you think government is able and ready to do that? And then maybe Tunde will go next, Juliet and Omowale.
Thanks, Ngozi. You know, is government ready or not? I mean, nobody really knows, but I'd like to focus on, I'd like entrepreneurs to just focus on their area of control and area of influence, right? Because the moment you're worried about something you have no control over, then it's almost like it's neither here nor there, right?
Sure.
And considering now you can actually be in Nigeria, but be serving a global audience. So who needs government anyway in that kind of scenario, right? But actually, we do hope that government will step up. And, you know, I think there's a number of things government is trying to do to help. The key thing is that, is it going to be incremental or is it going to be transformational? I think it really needs to be transformational. There's lots of opportunities in Nigeria. There's a lot of great startups. There's, you know, startups that's looking for capital, that need capital. And this is actually the time to put, you know, money in to support entrepreneurs so that they can actually target not just Nigeria, but across Africa and the world. And I think government has a significant role to play.
Thank you very much. Today,
I would suggest yes. I would suggest yes, that government is willing. The dependence on commodities, mono-commodities, done, I think. And they're reaching out to businesses, the business community. Oh, give us a view on what you feel we should do. How do we enable this? And I therefore think it's up to us to respond to those questions and as they reach out to us.
Thank you very much. Juliet.
What I'll say is now more than ever before, government's agenda around diversifying the economy is really important. And one sector that hasn't been mentioned so far is agriculture, is one we can't ignore because it's the largest single contributor to GDP, employs about 60 to 70% of the population. And there's a need for a lot of efficiencies in supply chain management, in getting products to market, in boosting productivity in that sector. And technology can play an important role as well. So it'll be great to create enablement in these sectors and also technology entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Juliet. Moale?
Well, government, are we ready? I don't know. But I do think it's going to take more than just, I think more than just the government. And the more a lot of private sector leaders also keep pushing. I mean, programs like this also a very good avenue to continue pushing, continue partnering and collaborating. And when we talk about government, it doesn't have to be federal government. We can start things at the state level. So where you have states that are willing to, you know, start up these things, have a digital economy and all of that, we can push for that and collaborate with the government to make that happen.
Whoa, thank you very much, everyone. Unfortunately, we've run past the 2 p.m. Timeline. I really would want to share the outcome of the poll to the question, how ready we are, as how optimistic are we that Africa will capture the emerging opportunities. And the outcome of this poll is that 61% of us feel that are moderately optimistic. So we had an option of extremely optimistic, and it was only 13% of our participants that felt we were extremely optimistic. An overwhelming majority at 61% think that we are moderately optimistic. Very slightly optimistic, 25%, not at all, 1%. So there's light at the end of the tunnel if more people feel that we are moderately ready. I think we've had a really extensive discussion over the 1 hour. I've personally found it very enriching. I want to thank all my panelists. Say thank you very much for making the time to share your knowledge and your experience. Thank the participants for also doing a wonderful job. There are all sorts of questions that have come in, some of which we weren't able to take. There are questions around what RAC Center does. I think today people will be reaching out to you soon. Julia, there are some questions that were posed to you particularly and specifically, same with Omowale, and many questions to me in terms of investments. I think what we can do is gather these questions, just thinking or depending on how Business Day thinks about this. Perhaps we may have a version 2.0 webinar sometime soon where we'll try to address all these questions. But thank you for your time, my panelists. Thank you for all the people and the audience that made time to join this discussion. I'll now hand over to Frank to give the closing remarks. Mr. Frank, I will. Well, in the absence of Frank giving the closing remarks, just to say thank you again and have a good day. We've come to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much and bye-bye.
Thank you, Ngozi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. The host had unmute me. I couldn't, they had muted me and I couldn't unmute. They took away my video. I couldn't put it back until now. So thanks for stepping in.
Not a problem. Bye-bye.
I really like this, and I like the point Bumi made about after. That was what I wanted to say in closing, and how indeed our regulators would need to step up. And I like the question you asked Bumi, whether he thought our regulators were really keen about making, so I think all of that will help. And perhaps the businesses and the citizens in Nigeria should start now putting pressure on government and its agencies to begin to behave and enable, the environment so we can all thrive. Ngozi, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure to you all. Tunde, thank you. I see you are smiling. I don't know whether you answered some of those questions. There was one from a guy who said they host their server in America. If you look at the questions and wanted to know what kind of capacity you have, so.
Oh yeah, certainly. And we do have capacity and capability here locally now, and it continues to evolve and improve.
Fine, thank you. So you just follow up with the guy who asked the question.
Very much.
Julia, thank you. Julia, thank you very much. Omowale, my pleasure. Really appreciate this. And Bumi, I'm waiting for an invitation when the lockdown is over.
No problem. You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now.